On September 15th, 2016, in Brooklyn, New York, a woman named Josette Buchman was on a simple mission to pick up some things from her sister-in-law, Rita's home, while Rita was in the hospital. But the moment Josette stepped inside, it was like entering a whole weird space full of stuff. Everywhere she looked, there was trash, old boxes, mystery piles. It looked like a garbage truck had just emptied itself right in there. And the smell was a mix of old food that seemed unforgettable. Something pulled Josette toward the attic bedroom, although why, we may never know. As she opened the door, she found herself face to face with something truly strange. It was a skeleton lying on a mattress, like it had just decided to take a little nap. For 20 years. The jeans, socks, shirt, everything was perfectly in place. At this point, Josette's jaw must have hit the floor, because it turns out this skeleton was none other than her long-lost nephew, Louis, who had disappeared 2 decades ago. No one knew where he went until now. So, what happened here? With that, let's dive into today's story. How does someone live with a corpse for 20 years without anyone noticing? That sounds almost impossible, right? But you'd be surprised that there are corpses in hoarders' homes more often than you'd think. Or rather, more often than anyone would hope. Take pets, for example. It's sad, but pets end up as some of the most common casualties in these homes. Tamara and Jeremy Bender, who cleaned some hoarders' houses, once found 60 cats in a single house, and 19 of them had passed on. And it's not even just cats. In Australia, too, a cleaner named Chris Burgess even found a mummified dog in one house. It doesn't stop there. In Sydney, July 2017, Bruce Roberts, a local man, suddenly stopped showing up for groceries. The store staff got worried and called the police. When they checked his home, they found him, and he'd passed away from natural causes, surrounded by piles of garbage. However, where it got weirder was when, a year later, in June 2018, cleaners came to get the house ready for sale, and under layers of old trash and who knows what, they found something that would give anyone nightmares. Buried in the rubble, wrapped up in an old carpet, were the bones of another man. The remains seemed to have been there for about 8 years, hidden under piles of junk. Nobody knows the whole story, but people are piecing together some clues. Thankfully, there are already a few leads here. First, Shane Snellman's skeletal remains were discovered in a house that no one would have ever thought could be the scene of a deadly encounter. Shane, known to the local police for minor crimes like selling drugs and breaking and entering, was likely up to no good when he met Robert. Robert had become increasingly paranoid over the years, obsessed with keeping his home secure. So when Shane decided to break into his house, something went wrong. The two got into a fight, and it ended up costing Shane his life. Now, Robert's house, the very place where all this drama went down, was sold at auction for over 2 million Australian dollars. You'd think the house would be some kind of crime scene attraction, but nope. The new owners had it bulldozed and are turning it into a fancy luxury home. How could anyone even want to live in a house that was piled high with so much junk that someone could die under all the trash and no one would even notice? How could anyone forget what the floors even looked like? But apparently, lots of people don't mind it at all. In fact, some people can't help it. Tamara Bender, a mental health expert, said, "I haven't met a hoarder who wanted to live like that. It affects their mental health." It turns out that hoarding is actually a real mental health condition called compulsive hoarding, where people keep tons of things, even if they have no real value. Some of the most commonly hoarded items include newspapers, magazines, and clothing, basically anything that could be shoved into a corner and forgotten. It's so bad that, sometimes the idea of getting rid of things causes major stress. The most shocking part is that hoarding can start when someone is a teenager, but most people don't get help until they're about 50. And it's also linked to obsessive-compulsive disorder, or OCD. In fact, 1 in 5 hoarders also deal with other OCD symptoms, making it even harder to break free from the cycle. According to the UK's National Health Service, hoarding disorder also has associations with severe depression and psychotic disorders like schizophrenia. And while the exact causes of hoarding are not known, hoarding can be connected to traumatic events like the death of a loved one. Hoarders may also hold strong beliefs about items, like thinking that buying more items will make them happy. The story of Rita was quite interesting as a hoarder. Rita, who was legally blind, was a bit of a recluse. Her neighbors didn't really know much about her, except that she always walked around with a grocery bag, looking down, and never said hello. Some thought she was a little strange, but no one could have guessed a skeleton was hidden inside her home. It was a real human skeleton, belonging to her son, Louis, who had been dead for nearly 20 years. How could Rita not have known? Well, for starters, her house smelled so bad that it was hard to tell what was rotting and what wasn't. The smell of old food filled the air, and when police got to the room where the skeleton was found, they couldn't even smell decaying flesh. It was so hidden beneath the layers of clutter that it almost seemed like no one could find anything, let alone a body. Rita wasn't just hoarding food and junk, she was also hiding the secret of her son's death. Many believe that hoarding isn't just about collecting things. It's often linked to deep emotional pain or trauma. Rita might have felt like keeping everything, every item, was the only way to hold on to something, even if it meant living in a house so messy. Neighbors remember her walking around with her grocery bags, but no one knew what was going on behind closed doors. Rita, who lived alone, hadn't been able to take care of herself, let alone face the reality of her son's death. After Rita was questioned by the police about her son, she seemed to think he had moved out years ago. The authorities believed she had no idea there was a corpse hidden in her home. Louis, her son, had been separated from the rest of his family, so when he disappeared, no one really noticed. It was concluded that Louis had been terminally ill and likely died of natural causes. It seems Rita had no involvement in his death, and it was a sad, tragic situation. Once everything came to light, the house was cleared out, and although Rita's exact whereabouts were unclear, it was reported that she was most likely placed in an assisted living home by her family. Hoarding can create many dangers, from fire risks to health problems caused by clutter and pests. It can even damage a person's ability to work or maintain relationships. So, what should you do if you know someone struggling with hoarding disorder? It's not always easy to help, especially because people with hoarding disorder form deep attachments to their belongings, which makes parting with them incredibly painful. Mental illness, especially hoarding, can be hard to talk about. The NHS offers some advice. First, gently encourage them to see a doctor and be supportive. Let them know you're concerned about their health and remind them that just cleaning up the mess won't solve everything. It's the deeper issues that need attention, and a therapist who specializes in hoarding might help them. The goal is to help the person declutter at their own pace, without pushing them too hard, and sometimes that softer approach is the key. A little empathy goes a long way. Otherwise, things might just spiral into a bigger mess.